What's going on, guys? We're installing pads and rotors on Project FC3. We're going to show you exactly how to do both the front and back. Let's get started. What is going on, guys? It's JP from edgeautosport.com. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and like the video. If you have any comments or questions, let us know. We'll definitely get back to you. We have a pair of rotors right here. This is for the left side, the rear and the front. So this is actually kind of a part 2 video. We alluded to what we were going to do in the last video in part 1, where we presented EBC's entire lineup of pads and rotors that are now available for the 10th Gen Civic 1.5 turbo specifically. They are on our site, ready to go. You can purchase them on our site. But yeah, we are going to install them for ourselves. So I mentioned in that video, I think, that which ones we were going to install, but I'll make sure to go over that again with you. So we have the BSD rotors. This is the front, this is the rear. You can see the front is vented. The front sees a lot more heat than the rear. And this is exactly what the stock style is. We're not changing anything. The caliper is staying the same, so it has to be the same, you know, dimensionally anyway. But the front rotor is much bigger and vented right here. The rear rotor is right here, just a single disc. It's kind of got this like V slot design. That's gonna do a few things. It's gonna help wear the pad a lot more even and kind of sync up the pad with the rotor a little bit better. And it's also gonna help keep the rotor and the pad cooler instead of getting so hot at the track. It's going to help get the gases and debris out of there as the pad and the rotor create friction against each other. So it's just a little bit more, you know, performance design than just a blank rotor. For most people, blank rotors are totally fine, but you know, this looks kind of cool too. So if you want that performance look, this is a good option as well. It's not like you're paying a ton more money for the slots, but they do perform well at the track. So anyway, yellow stuff pads are what we're going with on this project. I like the yellow stuff pads because they're kind of like a track day pad, but they actually bite really well in the cold and when they're not quite heated up yet. EBC says you can use these on the street. They're definitely streetable pads, but they perform pretty well at the track. I've definitely taken these out to a track on a different car, and they held up really well through several laps. So you can put a lot of heat in these and they do not fade very easily at all. There was just a tiny bit of fade you could realize that, like, after, you know, several laps. So these work really, really good at the track, but also work good on the street. You can't always say that about every pad that is made for the track. So I like the yellow stuff pads. We've always had really good reviews from our customers for the yellow stuff pads, also for red stuff. Those are good for the same thing. Probably not quite as aggressive at the track, but we've always had customers say really good things about EBC. So we are going with the yellow stuff pads right here. So yeah, we are gonna do a very in-depth, we don't always do in-depth installations, but this is an easy enough one to do, and one that pretty much everybody, I mean, can do. It's not super, super hard, but everybody is going to need to replace their brakes at some point in time. Unless you're one of those people that trade in your car because your brakes need to be replaced. Don't do that, just replace them. Keep enjoying your car. Everybody's gonna need them. We sell a ton of brakes, so this is gonna teach you how to install it on your 10th Gen. So without further ado, let's start taking the wheels off and get under this thing. I will teach you everything you need to know about how to get these on. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna do is obviously take off the wheel of the car. Obviously, we have ours on a lift right now. A lot of you guys are not gonna be doing this on a lift, but we're just doing this so that we can, you know, well, we would do it anyway, actually. That's why we bought a lift. But we're gonna get some good angles and just be able to see a lot better by using the lift. But don't be intimidated to do this on the ground. With some simple jack stands and a floor jack, you can get plenty of clearance and plenty of access, just like we're gonna show you. So take out the wheel first. Shameless plug here. We are taking off the Project Kicks lug nuts that we use. These are really nice if you guys have aftermarket wheels. This little mating surface that goes onto the wheel, once it contacts the wheel, it stops spinning. It sits on the wheel while the lug nut continues to spin, so it keeps your wheels in good shape. So go pick yourself up a set. All right, so we're gonna take off the caliper first. Obviously, that's the first thing that you have to take off in order to gain access to the rotor. If you were replacing pads, you would pretty much do this the same way that I'm gonna show you. Take off the center part of the caliper first, and then we're gonna take off the bracket second. The center part of the caliper is attached using 14mm bolts, and then the part that attaches to the spindle, or like the steering knuckle, is gonna be a 17. So 14 and 17 to start. All right, so the center of the caliper is completely loose right now. You're gonna back that off, take this off of here. And on ours, the pads are gonna stay in there, and you just need to make sure to have a good place to you know, keep this thing. Actually, be careful when you take that off, because there is a spring that keeps these things pushed away from the rotor, you know, and that obviously just kind of pushed this out. So just kind of grab onto these as you take off the caliper, like I didn't, and put this this piston part of the caliper just kind of off to the side. Make sure it doesn't fall, because we're going to keep the brake line attached. All right, next up is just go ahead and take off this spring on the back right here. You're going to retain this. EBC does not give you a new one, so make sure you keep this. Take off these pads. They come out pretty easily. Now ours are super, I mean, they're like brand new. These pads have hardly even been touched or hardly even been used. So yours might not look like this when you take yours off, but nonetheless, those are the pads. Now you'll notice on the back of the inside pad, there's a metal plate. That's where the piston has been contacting the pad. And then there's just kind of a regular black shim on the outer pad. You want to keep this metal shim right here, or this metal kind of guard. That's going to be reused on the new pad. That's going to help the piston not kind of dig into the backing of the pad. So we'll keep that. We'll keep this spring, and I'll show you the new brake pads. Okay, so we have the new front pads in front of us right now. As you can see, you've got these holes right here. That's where that spring is going to be. There's a hole at the top and the bottom, but you'll only use one, at least on our car. I don't know if other model years have modified this, but we just have the one coming off of our car. And then you have the wear indicator as well. So this thing right here, once you get down to a certain point of the pad not being totally worn out or next to totally worn out, this will start screeching against the rotor, so you'll know that you have a low pad. So, but let's get the rotor off first before we put the new pads on. All right, next up is the 17mm bolt that holds it onto the spindle. So we'll take that off now, and that'll just remove this bracket right here. All right, here you go. This is the bracket that the caliper attaches to. Just take this off and set it to the side. All right, so we need a Phillips head screwdriver to take out this bolt right here. It kind of holds the rotor on. Not all cars have that. Some of them, like once you take the caliper off, the rotor is just kind of loose, but the Honda has one of these. So you just have to take this bad boy out. This can be kind of tricky to get off. This one was kind of already loose. It kind of gave us a little bit of trouble, but hold the brake, get you know, the right Phillips screwdriver that fits it the best, because they can be pretty tight. It gets really heated up and can kind of stick in there a little bit. So anyway, take that out, and then the rotor just pops right off. All right, so take your new rotor right here. The EBC rotors have L and R on them, so obviously this is left side. So we're gonna put this thing on here. Actually, you gotta line up the screw hole. Forgot about that. So it only goes on one way with that screw in there. So I'm also gonna take off this L sticker, because this car doesn't take L's. I might take an L trying to get it off though. All right, boom, there we go. All right, let's put this screw back in here, just like we took it off, and it should center it up nicely. Just give it a little tight snug, and the rotor is on. We're ready to put the bracket back on before we put the pads on. If you have an old or a highly used caliper, you might need to re-grease these pins that connect the two pieces of the caliper. But either way, you definitely want to just kind of take a wire brush and brush some of this debris off, just to make it as clean of a surface as possible. So I'm going to do that really quick right now over the trash can, and then we'll slap this thing back onto the car. right, so before we get the other part of the caliper back on and grease up the pads and the caliper, what you want to do is make sure that the piston inside of here is fully compressed into the piston housing. As you can see, ours is really close already. I mean, this car is very new from a mileage standpoint. So this thing has hardly been used. We're still gonna compress it in just to show you, but yours might be a lot further out depending on your pad wear. So you just have to compress that back in. I just picked up this tool actually for this video because I didn't have one of these, but this something like this. I think you can rent these as well from the parts store. I think they have stuff like this. So this is just a ratcheting tool. You place these, you know, these little flat pieces, these spreaders in the caliper and just kind of ratchet it so that it pushes the caliper piston back in. So I'll do that right now. Once it is completely spread apart, you can put it on reverse and then back this thing back out of there and just take it right out. Nice and smooth surface to mount the pads into. Before we put the pads back in, make sure you know which one you're working with here. The one with the wear indicator is going to go on the inside. Just make sure to pay attention to the ones that you took off. As you can see, the one with the metal backing has the wear indicator, so make sure you reuse, or make sure you put the pads in the right place. We're going to take this metal piece off of that the old pad. Like I said, probably need a screwdriver. So we'll take this off of here. Okay, put these shims on these new pads just like this. And then on the inside of the one with the wear indicator, you're also, like I said, going to use this metal plate. And actually, I'm going to brush this one off with that brush again. Just kind of clean it up just a little bit, make it nice and flat and smooth. All right, so slap this thing on here. And what we're going to do is we're going to put grease on all the parts of the pad that are going to be touching the caliper. That's going to be the ends right here. And this is where they sit inside the metal brackets. The end of the piston right here, and then on the outside of this pad, you know, it'll be like a couple like prongs right here for where the caliper grabs it right there. So you're going to want to put grease right where these are going to touch the pad. So we're using this CRC brake and caliper grease. This stuff is just like, you know, the O'Reilly special or Napa Auto Parts special, whatever. It's you know, just pretty generic. You do not need a lot. You don't need a lot of this stuff. Just a little bit, just to make sure that that surface is smooth. All right, these things are ready to go on the car now, so let's go over there and put them on. So the next part is take this spring. You'll notice I put the pads on there before I put this spring on. This spring is fairly spring loaded, so this will pull the pads apart if you don't have the caliper on there yet. So we're going to hold them in those little pinholes at the top, just like how we took it out, and then I'm going to slide the outer part of the caliper right over it so that I can let this go. All right, so I got a little bit of grease on my hands. I don't want to get too much of this stuff all greased up just in the areas that you need it. So I'm gonna take off these gloves and just let that sit there. We'll tighten that thing back up here in just a second. All right, so just take your 14 mil socket, get those nice and snug. Front's pretty much done at this point, so not too bad. Not too bad. If you have any excess grease kind of on this middle section here, go ahead and wipe it off. You don't want grease in areas that doesn't really need to be, just the minimum areas where it contacts the caliper. All right, so let's move on to the rear, which is pretty much about as easy. Another couple steps because of the electronic e-brake, which I will go through with you. There's a couple ways to do it, but we'll head over to the back and I'll show you. Got it? Okay, so I've got a 5 mil Allen socket right here, or Allen bit. So you're gonna need some way to get at it at an angle. So, you know, use a wobbly or some sort of adapter like this. And I have my 3/8" drive. So we're gonna set this up to the Allens on the back of the actuator here. The reason why you need kind of the wobbly here is because the shock is right in the way. You're not gonna be able to get at it unless you have like just an Allen tool, but we don't use basic tools like that. So I'm using the fancy stuff. For the one that's, you know, towards the front the most, I'm just gonna use kind of a regular extension right here. And you just kind of wrap it around the back of the shock and you can get at it from that angle. Okay, now carefully just back the actuator off and we're just kind of gonna set it off to the side behind where the caliper is at. Make sure you're careful with it. There we go. There's plenty of grease on the back of here too. So try not to contaminate it too much. Keep the grease on there as much as you possibly can because that's just gonna go right back on. All right, you're gonna go ahead and take your 11 Torx socket, like I said, put it on the back of this thing, and it's very, very easy to turn. You don't need a tool. You can just do it by hand. Just slide that thing over and rotate it all the way clockwise. Just like that. And now we are ready to take off the caliper. So pretty much the same procedure as the front at this point. It just looks slightly different. So you got these two bolts that are kind of behind this little rubber boot here. Take off that cap and you can access both bolts right here. And then you're going to take the entire bracket off right here as well once you're ready to take the rotor off. So here we go. One thing I forgot to tell you before we take the caliper off completely is you have to take this spring off of here as well. So you can just, it's you know, once it's on there pretty good, but once you slide a screwdriver in there, you can just kind of twist this thing out, pop it loose. Just like so. Once everything's off, just go ahead and remove this upper assembly. Hold on to the brake pads and set this off to the side. Again, there's grease on the back of there, so let's try not to contaminate it. Try to keep it clear of resting on anything that's gonna give it some debris. All right, and the rear brake pads, you can tell they do not need to, you don't need to move any of the shims over from the pads, from the old pads to the new ones. The new ones come with their own shims, so no need to take anything off of this. And as you can see, this is the wear indicator on the rear, so we'll make sure to replace them at the same spot. Next up, we will go ahead and take this bracket off so that we can get the rotor off, and once the rotor's off, we can pretty much follow the same procedure as we did on the front to get everything back on. All right, 17 millimeter again. We use a breaker bar to crack these loose. All right, bracket is off. Let's go ahead and take off the rotor now. Sometimes I get stuck. We'll have to take this one off with, just kind of put a mallet on it and break it loose. Boom. All right, you want to take the wire brush. I totally forgot to do this on the front. The fronts are pretty clean, but I mean, honestly, both of them are pretty clean, but it's good practice to just take a wire brush and just kind of smooth this out a little bit, take a little bit of the debris off, and make sure the surface is as flat as possible. All right, rotor's on again, no L's. Sometimes L's are an SOB. There we go. Get out of here, L. All right, so from here it's pretty much a matter of following the same steps to put everything back on. You know, the e-brake is, you just slide that thing on there. If the e-brake actuator does not go back on smoothly, it could just need to, you might just need to twist that stud just barely, just so it lines up with the actuator, but everything else should go back together smoothly. There is no spring on the rear that pushes the pads off the rotor, so you don't have to worry about that. But you do need to do all the grease and stuff, just like the front. So I'll take you through that real quick, and you can just watch along, and you can just read along, and you can just play along, or just watch. We're gonna put the shims on the rear pads now. Remember, it's the same as the first. The wear indicator goes on the inside, so we're gonna put grease on this one on the center, which is where the piston from the caliper is gonna press in. And then we're gonna put this shim on the outside, and the two prongs from the caliper will sit right here as well. So we'll grease right here on this one and in the center on this one. I forgot to tell you, if you want to get the piston back in on the rear, it does require a special tool if yours doesn't turn very easily, or if it's kind of too far depressed. So if you don't, you can probably also rent those tools, but if you don't have that, good luck. Okay, so I was just joking earlier about the whole good luck thing, pressing this in. To be perfectly honest, again, this is very, very, you know, minimally depressed right here. We're gonna try to compress it in just a little bit, just to be able to squeeze over the brand new pads a little bit better. This is so new though that yours will probably be depressed out a little bit more. You can honestly take this thing, this one will spin. You can spin this, the tool will spin it back in, but you can also, if it's just got a little way to travel, you can also press this thing back in. As you can see, it moves very slow, and it's pretty difficult to press it in, but you can get it in there. So we'll put it back on now. All right, before you put these pins back on to connect both pieces of the caliper, we're just gonna throw some grease on here, just a little bit, nothing crazy. Just wanna make sure this thing slides and moves properly. Okay, last thing to do is just to get that actuator back on there. Our spring is tight, our bolts are tight, caliper's on. Everything is good to go, so we just need to get that e-brake back on there and we're good to go. Okay guys, well I hope you enjoyed that installation video. We don't do too many of those where we go in depth, so hopefully that helped you out. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. You can also get in touch with us through sales or support at edgeautosport.com. We'd be glad to help you there as well. I hope your brake job goes well. Let us know what you think, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks guys.